Bibliophiles of the internet, my name is Adriana and today I'm here to finally bring you my July wrap-up. This July was probably the best reading month I've ever had in my entire life. And of course I have to contribute a lot of that to Booktube-a-Thon, which I killed. And before I tell you the total number of books that I read this month, which is kind of obscene, I'm just gonna say that you guys are gonna have to stop expecting me to be putting up these huge numbers once school starts, because then my life will be over. But for now we are in summer, and like I said, there was a readathon this month, so I ended up reading 33 books total. 14 of those were novels, 16 were manga volumes, and 3 were graphic novels. The first 3 things that I read in July, you guessed it, were manga volumes, and those belong to the Pandora Hearts series by Jun Mochizuki. I have previously described what Pandora Hearts is all about in my June wrap-up, but I also talked a lot about this series in my manga recommendations video, which I will leave in the description. So far, the volume that I'm holding, volume 2, is my favorite in the series, and it was a perfect 5 out of 5 stars. And then I gave volume 3 4.5 stars, and I gave volume 4 4.5 stars as well. And then I checked out a book from my local library, and that was The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer by Michelle Hodkin. It details the story of a character named Mara, who is the sole survivor of a very traumatic event. So when her family moves away to get away from all this turmoil, Mara realizes that there's really no escaping these unexplainable, treacherous events that keep happening around her no matter where she goes. And for me, the biggest problem with this series so far is that I'm very captivated by Mara's story, especially the beginning. It was really gripping and I wanted to know what was happening. There are very inexplicable, creepy things going down. But then 100 or so pages in, the story gets hijacked by this strange high school romance, and there's all this trite high school drama, and I hate that. And this first book is like 400 something pages, and in my opinion it really didn't need to be, because the middle was kind of unnecessary filler in my opinion. So when all was said and done, I only gave The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer 2 out of 5 stars, and that's being more than fair on my part. And so the next book that I read is the first book in a trilogy that is shaping up to possibly be my 3rd favorite trilogy of all time. And that's a big deal. And that book was The Girl of Fire and Thorns by Ray Carson. So this is a story about a princess named Elisa Lucero. In the beginning of the story, she is getting ready to be married to a prince of a neighboring kingdom, but a bigger part of her story is that she is a carrier of what is known as a godstone. A godstone is basically exactly what it sounds like. It is believed to be bestowed upon the bearer by God himself, and it is the destiny of the carriers to achieve some kind of greatness that will in some way benefit humanity. So her life is constantly in danger because the godstone is a very valuable thing. And not long after she gets married to this prince and moves to his country, she ends up getting kidnapped, and the adventure just progresses from there. I am very much in love with this series because it is a YA high fantasy series that is inspired by Hispanic culture. Yeah, I honestly don't think I have the words to tell you guys how much I love this series. It's very well written and I really love the characters. So I ended up giving the first book in this trilogy 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend it. The next 3 things that I read were all graphic novels, and they were all to some degree written by the same author. The first one is Friends with Boys by Faith Erin Hicks. And this story is about a girl who has been homeschooled her entire life, and she only knows what it's like to be around all of her brothers. So it follows her as she makes the transition from being homeschooled to going to an actual high school and trying to make friends and all of that. But little does anybody know, she's actually dealing with being haunted. The artwork in this story is fantastic. I really love all the backdrops and the backgrounds. Everything's very detailed. But more than anything else in this story, I really love how Faith Erin Hicks portrayed the relationship dynamics between siblings and between friends. It was funny, it was quirky, it was highly entertaining, and it was also very heartwarming. So I ended up giving that one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The second graphic novel that I read by her is kind of a collaboration between 3 authors, and so that is Brain Camp. It's written in part by Faith Erin Hicks, Susan Kim and Lawrence Clavon. This is the story of two academic underachievers, and as punishment for their laziness in school, their parents are sending them to this camp. But they realize once getting there that everyone is just a little bit off kilter. Something is not right there, and they're trying to figure out why everybody seems like they've been brainwashed. This is definitely my least favorite Faith Erin Hicks book. It was extremely short, and I didn't think that everything had the proper development. Also, I have to say that the story really does turn extremely weird towards the end, and it's not that the weirdness is the problem, it's just that I don't think it had a point. So I really didn't end up enjoying this one, but just because I still really like Faith Erin Hicks' art style, and because I thought there were moments sometimes that were humorous, I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. And the last of her graphic novels that I read this month was Nothing Can Possibly Go Wrong. Obviously, this is by Faith Erin Hicks and also Prudence Shen. This story is basically about two very unlikely best friends. One of them is in the robotics club and the other one is the captain of the basketball team. So one day the principal breaks the news to the robotics club that the school does not have the proper funding that will allow them to send the robotics club to this competition and also buy the cheerleaders new uniforms. So once the robotics club learns that, it's basically a war between the cheerleaders and the geeks, and somehow the captain of the basketball team finds himself right in the middle of it all. I loved this book. It was so funny and it was so entertaining, and I loved everything about it. Again, there were these fantastic friendship and relationship dynamics that I really appreciated, and it really messes with that whole popular people versus the geeks convention and makes it very memorable and fun. So this was definitely my favorite Faith Erin Hicks book, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend this one as well. The next novel that I read was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, and this story is about a married couple, Nick and Amy Dunn. On the morning of their 5th wedding anniversary, Amy goes missing, and the evidence left behind at the scene suggests foul play or murder. And as you may imagine, Nick, the husband, is the prime suspect. I did an entire book review on this book because I enjoyed it so much, so if you want to hear more about my thoughts, I will leave that in the description. But I ended up giving this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And the next 15 books that I read during the Booktube-a-Thon. So for the first time in my life, I read all 5 of the Percy Jackson and the Olympian books by Rick Riordan. I completed the Death Note manga series, but just to clarify, I read 5 of those volumes before the Booktube-a-Thon, but I finished the last 7 during the Booktube-a-Thon. And I read The Evolution of Mara Dyer, Amy and Roger's Epic Detour, and last night I sang To the Monster. So if you want complete synopses, thoughts / mini reviews, and my ratings for all of the books that I just mentioned, please check out my Booktube-a-Thon wrap up if you have not already. So the first thing that I read after the Booktube-a-Thon was actually a collection of short stories, and that is One More Thing, Stories and Other Stories by BJ Novak. Of course, because he is a comedian and he writes for a lot of comedic shows, there is a lot of humor in these stories as well, but also they contain some adult content and adult language, just letting you know. This collection of short stories was pretty good. I liked how every story kind of had like a punchline or a moral at the end of it. So while I relatively enjoyed reading through this collection of short stories, I didn't think it was the best. I didn't think it was as well written as it could have been, and I just didn't think it was that memorable or special, so I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. And after that, the next book that I finished was for a buddy read / read along that I did, which was for The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is an adult fantasy story, and it revolves around a main character named Kvothe. He is a very intriguing man, and there are many rumors about him that are circulating around the land. And so the way that this story is set up is that there is a man who is a chronicler, and he wants to get the truth. He wants to get Kvothe's story. So there are 3 days that are set aside for Kvothe to tell his entire life story. So book 1 covers the first day of storytelling, in which Kvothe talks extensively about his childhood, his origins, how he grew up as an orphan, and how he tried to get into this very prestigious university. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was extremely well written. It has a very poetic kind of writing style. And also I found Kvothe's character and narration to be extremely engaging and captivating. Going into it, you expect something more fantastical, something more magical, but what you find is something that's kind of more ordinary. And when I was trying to decide whether to be disappointed by that or not, I kind of think that's the point. Just the same way that the chronicler wants to get to the bottom of these rumors, the audience is approaching Kvothe as this untouchable, legendary character. And when you go in expecting to see a legend, you actually find an ordinary man. So I think that's kind of the point, like I said. I really liked it and I thought it was an amazing start to the series. I'm very excited to see where the second one is going to take us, and I ended up giving this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The penultimate book that I read in July was actually a manga bind-up, and that was Romeo x Juliet. This story takes place in Neo Verona. Originally, there were 2 powerhouse families, obviously the Capulets and the Montagues, but the Montagues staged a slaughtering of the Capulets, and the only survivor of that slaughter is Juliet. So for the next 14 years of her life, she's going into hiding and she's disguising herself as a boy. Meanwhile, the current Montague ruler is running Neo Verona and its people into the ground. So Juliet disguises herself as this vigilante hero called the Red Whirlwind. Romeo and Juliet meet by chance, and this story is all about whether their love and their relationship can inflict positive change onto Neo Verona. I really liked the concept and the end game of this manga a lot, and also I found the artwork to be very beautiful and dynamic as well. I wish the relationship in this story would have more development. In that aspect, it's very much like the original Romeo and Juliet. It's kind of like insta-love. So I ended up giving this bind-up a 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I still really enjoyed it. And the final thing that I read in July is a little bit cheating because I technically finished it a little bit into August 1st, but I read like 98% of this book in July, so I'm gonna give it to myself. Anyways, that book is Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. This is a really awesome retelling of the original Russian fairy tale of Koschei the Deathless, and the story is about a main character named Maria Marevna who ends up marrying Koschei the Deathless. And so the story follows her from her childhood when she learns that she can kind of see things that other people don't really see or understand, and then as she ends up marrying Koschei, and then how they sort of end up being each other's undoing. There is a dark romance to Catherine M. Valente's writing style in this book, and it's very poetic. It's like a fairy tale, an adventure story, a romance, and a tragedy all in one. It's just so good. I cannot emphasize that enough. And I gave this book a clear 5 out of 5 stars. So those were all the books that I read in July. There was a lot of them, I know. If you have read any of these books, please feel free to leave your opinions and your thoughts in the comments below. But also, I would love to know what were some of the things that you read in July. What was the best thing that you read during July? So that's it for me and this wrap-up video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and thank you very much for watching. I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye.